everyone, especially Mrs. Ida. On this occasion, I will present the translation technique by Molina Albir. First, let me introduce myself. My name is Alifia Qothrunnada with name V0120004 from the Tiga Bahasa Inggris Universitas 11 Maret. What is translation technique? Molina and Albir said that a technique is the result of a choice made by a translator. Its validity will depend on various questions related to the context, the purpose of the translation, audience expectation, and the others. Define that translation techniques allow the people to describe the actual steps which taken by the translators in each textual microunit and obtain clear data about the general methodological option chosen. Translation technique is called as the realization of the dictation, making process where the product of translation can be identified on the translation result. There are 18 translation techniques which are stated by Molina and Albir. First is adaptation. Adaptation is a technique that replaces the short language cultural elements with ones which has the same condition and situation in the target language culture. For the example, they're here in my 4-dimensional packet. Mereka di dalam kantong ajaib. Kantong ajaib in target language is general terms in the Doraemon movie series than the term of 4-dimension packet. Indonesian viewers are more familiar with kantong ajaib. Okay, next, amplification. Amplification is a technique that conveys details that are not formulated or stated in short language. For the example, good morning, you are early today. Selamat pagi, kamu datang lebih awal hari ini. Translator translates Nobi early into Nobita datang lebih awal. If it's translated literally, it will be Nobita lebih awal hari ini. Translator adds the word datang as verb in target language to add information about the certain person activity clearly. Borrowing is a technique that takes a word or expression straight from another language. It can be copied, reproduced, translated, or changed in target language exactly as a short language. It makes Shizuka hate you, so will everyone else too. Itu membuat Shizuka membencimu, begitu juga orang lain. The italic word name Shizuka in short language into Shizuka in target language is show the word is purely borrowed from the original into target language. Cut also called as loan translation. It's a technique translation of the word or phrase or from the short language into target language, which can be lexical or structural system. It also can be translation word for word in a language into another language. For example, I'll take her to anywhere. Aku akan kubawa dia ke pintu kemana saja. The translator use called technique of the pairs anywhere, door in short language, which is translated into pintu kemana saja in target language. Translator translates anywhere in target language is translated into kemana saja, while door is translated into pintu. Here, the anywhere door is a phrase which translated literally into phrase in target language. Compensation is a technique that introduces sub-language element of the information or stylistic effect in another place in the target language because it cannot be reflected in the same place as in the short language. For example, I was so moved that I couldn't stop crying. Aku sangat terharu oleh tangisan itu. Translator changes the element information and gives stylistic effect in target language because the short language cannot be reflected in the same place in the short language. Description. This technique is used to replace a term or expression in short language with a description of its form and or function in short language. Example, many people saw kimbap in the festival yesterday. Banyak orang menjajakan makanan khas Korea yang terbuat dari nasi, dicampur dengan berbagai bumbu, dan digulung dengan rumput laut saat festival kemarin. The word kimbap here is described in detail so that readers better understand the meaning of kimbap. Literal translation. It's a technique that translates a word or an expression in word for word. The short language is translated literally and focus on the form and structure without any addition or reduction into target language. For example, you can play ball with us today. Kau bisa bermain bola bersama kami hari ini. The structure of short language and target language is subject, auxiliary, verb, object, and complement. The short language is formed by subject, auxiliary, verb, and object and complement with us today. If it separated word for word, it will be you, kau, can, bisa, or dapat play bermain bola with bersama us kita today hari ini. Then modulation. Modulation is a technique that changes the point of view in the target language in order to focus or cognitive category in relation to short language. It is a variation of the form of the message obtained by a change the point of view. It allows in expressing the same phenomenon in a different way. For example, hey Nobi, you're early again. Halo Nobita, kau tidak terlambat lagi. The translator changes the point of view in the short language to the target language, but still has some message or meaning of the utterance spoken in short language. Reduction. Reduction is a technique that reduces certain elements of the short language. It is also called elimination, omission, or subtraction, which suppressing as a short language information in the target language. For example, Mom, why didn't you wake me? Kenapa kau tidak membangunkan aku? Translator reduce the noun mom in target language. If the utterance in short language translated literally, it will be ibu. Kenapa kau tidak membangunkanku? There is reduction word mom, ibu. Transposition is a technique that changes a grammatical category in relation to the short language. This technique same with shift in category, structure, and unit shift, such as changing singular to plural, position of adjective, changing the word class or part of speech. For example, the cottage is still far away. Pondokan masih sangat jauh. From this data, it can be found transposition or shift. There is unit shift from the cottage in the short language to pondokan in target language. In short language, the form is noun phrase changed into noun. It is clear that the cottage is noun phrase and the target language pondokan is noun. Generalization is a translation technique by applying more general or natural terms in target language. For example, his apartment is so big. Tempat tinggalnya begitu besar. The word apartment is translated into the more natural to be tempat tinggalnya. Particulation. Particulation, this technique is the opposite of the generalization technique. This technique is carried out by using clearer and more correct term in the short language. For example, the term are exercising to fly the air transportation. Target language, pasukan militer itu sedang berlatih menerbangkan helikopter. The translation translates the word air transportation to be more specific into helicopter. Next is linguistic amplification. This technique is done by adding linguistic elements. Linguistic amplification techniques are often used in consecutive interpreting and dubbing. For example, left by his mother, the baby is crying now. Karena ditinggal pergi ibunya, bayi itu menangis sekarang. And next is linguistic comparison. Linguistic comparison is the opposite of linguistic amplification technique. This technique is done by synthesizing or considering linguistic elements in short language into short language so that it becomes more concise and the message is still conveyed. This technique is often used in simultaneous interpreting and subtitling. For example, yes I do, and the target language is yeah. The word yes I do here is translated to be more concise next substitution. Substitution technique or replacement is done by changing the linguistic element to paralinguistic elements, or intonation, gesture, or vice versa. This technique is often used in interpreting. For example, you following gesture made by Japanese people can be translated as thank you, sorry, hello, goodbye, welcome, and so on. And then the last is variation. Variation in this technique is applied by changing linguistic or paralinguistic elements like intonation or gesture, which affect aspect of linguistic variation, a change of textual tones, styles, social dialects, geographical dialects, and the others. This technique is used to introduce or change the actor dialect indicator when translating for the theater, changing pitch when adapting novel for children, and the others. For the example, changing the word you into Anda, the word me into saya, is an example of variation. Discursive creation is a technique that replaces a term or expression with a description of its form or an function. This technique is often used in the translation of the title of film, movie, book to indicate an equivalent that can only be valid in a certain context. For example, Stand By Me Doraemon, the target language, Tetaplah Bersamaku Doraemon. Translator translates the title of the movie Stand By Me change into Tetaplah Bersamaku to indicate the equivalent that is totally unpredictable out of the context. If the title in short language is translated literally or lexically based on the dictionary, the translation surely different with the intended meaning by the translator. The translation of movie in target language is enough for representing about the story of the movie. Next, establish equivalent. It's a technique that uses term or expression which is recognized in dictionary or language in use and everyday use as an equivalent in the target language. For example, thank you Doraemon, I owe everything to you. Terima kasih Doraemon, aku berhutang besar padamu. The translator use established equivalence technique. The word thanks in short language to be terima kasih in target language. Translator use expression which is recognized in daily conversation. Thanks into terima kasih. It's expression which is used for someone that say grateful to person for something. So that's my presentation. If there are any wrong words, please forgive me. Thank you.